Welcome everyone to episode 447 of Just Joshing, counting down to the end of the audio-only era. I am your host, Joshua Pantellaresco. I write stuff, podcast, soon to illustrate, and I host stuff too. Today, Alice in Wonderland, Chapter 5, Advice from a Caterpillar, and my guest, you just heard me turn my phone on, Swati Chavda. I hope I said that right, I really do. Swati is probably one of the coolest people I talk to day in and out. She is a poet, she is an author, she is probably one of the most talented people, and that says a lot actually, I say that a lot, but she's incredibly talented, excellent poet, motivational speaker, artist. She just does a lot of incredible things very well, and I'm very happy she's agreed to read for my show, and that's what she's doing this week. My next reader is not going to happen again until episode 455. So before I get to Alice, I'll talk about the future of the reading episodes. They are still going to be the only audio-only episodes going forward. They will still happen on the weekends. My plan is 3 normal interviews streaming live. You'll probably hear the audio versions of them here still, except it'll be Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday when you get them. Friday is going to be drink and draws. I have already my first 4 illustrators lined up for the months of November, December. I'm hoping to get some more for January. I'm going to be announcing the entire lineup from November 23rd to December 22nd. It's going to be an incredible little ride there, and yeah, I'm excited about that. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, regular interviews. Friday, drink and draws. Sunday, story time, featuring my guest. Or if not, I can't find a guest, I read more Alice in Wonderland. Speaking of which, let's get to that advice from a caterpillar, shall we?
This episode of Just Joshing is sponsored by Indie Imprint. Indie Imprint supports creators by creators. Whether you are writing a book or creating a video game, Indie Imprint works with its clients to produce, edit, and present their projects to the world. For more information, check out their website at www.indieimprint.com.
Chapter 5, Advice from a Caterpillar. The caterpillar and Alice looked at each other for some time in silence. At last, the caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth and addressed her in a languid, sleepy voice. "Who are you?" said the caterpillar. This was not an encouraging opening for a conversation. Alice replied, rather shyly, I hardly know, sir, just at present. At least I know who I was when I got up this morning. But I think I must have changed several times since then. What do you mean by that? Said the caterpillar sternly. Explain yourself. I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir, said Alice. 'Cause I'm not myself, you see. I don't see, said the caterpillar. I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly, Alice replied very politely, for I can't understand it myself to begin with. And being so many different sizes in a day is very confusing. It isn't, said the caterpillar. Well, perhaps you haven't found it so yet, said Alice. But when you have to turn into a chrysalis, you will someday, you know, and then after that into a butterfly. I should think you'll feel it a little queer, won't you? Not a bit, said the caterpillar. Well, perhaps your feelings may be different, said Alice. All I know is, it would feel very queer to me. You, said the caterpillar contemptuously. Who are you? Which brought them back again to the beginning of the conversation. Alice felt a little irritated at the caterpillar's making such very short remarks, and she drew herself up and said very gravely, I think you ought to tell me who you are first. Why, said the caterpillar. Here was another puzzling question, and as Alice could not think of any good reason, and the caterpillar seemed to be in a very unpleasant state of mind, she turned away. Come back, the caterpillar called after her. I've something important to say. This sounded promising, certainly. Alice turned and came back again. Keep your temper, said the caterpillar. Is that all? Said Alice, swallowing down her anger as well as she could. No, said the caterpillar. Alice thought she might as well wait, as she had nothing else to do, and perhaps after all it might tell her something worth hearing. For some minutes it puffed away without speaking, but at last it unfolded its arms, took the hookah out of its mouth again, and said, So you think you're changed, do you? I'm afraid I am, sir, said Alice. I can't remember things as I used, and I don't keep the same size for 10 minutes together. Can't remember what things, said the caterpillar. Well, I've tried to say, how doth the little busy bee? But it all came different, Alice replied in a very melancholy voice. Repeat, you are old, Father William, said the caterpillar. Alice folded her hands and began. You are old, Father William, the young man said, and your hair has become very white. And yet you incessantly stand on your head. Do you think at your age is right? In my youth, Father William replied to his son, I feared it might injure the brain. But now that I'm perfectly sure I have none, why, I do it again and again. You are old, said the youth, as I mentioned before, and have grown most uncommonly fat. Yet you turned a back somersault in at the door. Pray, what is the reason of that? In my youth, said the sage as he shook his grey locks, I kept all my limbs very supple. By the use of this ointment, 1 shilling in the box, allow me to sell you a couple? You are old, said the youth, and your jaws are too weak for anything tougher than sway. Yet you finished the goose with the bones in the beak. Pray, how did you manage to do it? In my youth, said his father, I took to law, and argued each case with my wife, and the muscular scrape which it gave to my jaw had lasted the rest of my life. You are old, said the youth, one would hardly suppose that your eye was as steady as ever. Yet you balanced an eel on the end of your nose. What made you so awfully clever? I have answered 3 questions, and that is enough, said his father. Don't give yourself airs. Do you think I can listen all day to such stuff? Be off, or I'll kick you downstairs. That is not said right, said the caterpillar. Not quite right, I'm afraid, said Alice timidly. Some of the words have got altered. It is wrong from beginning to end, said the caterpillar, decidedly, and there was silence for some minutes. The caterpillar was the first to speak. What size do you want to be? It asked. Oh, I'm not particular as to size, Alice hastily replied. Only one doesn't like changing so often, you know. I don't know, said the caterpillar. Alice said nothing. She had never been so much contradicted in all her life before, and she felt that she was losing her temper. Are you content now? Said the caterpillar. Well, I should like to be a little larger, sir, if you wouldn't mind, said Alice. 3 inches is such a wretched height to be. It is a very good height indeed, said the caterpillar angrily, rearing itself outright as it spoke. It was exactly 3 inches high. But I'm not used to it, pleaded poor Alice in a piteous tone, and she thought to herself, I wish the creatures wouldn't be so easily offended. You'll get used to it in time, said the caterpillar, and it put the hookah into its mouth and began smoking again. This time Alice waited patiently until it chose to speak again. In a minute or two the caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth and yawned once or twice and shook itself. Then it got down off the mushroom and crawled away into the grass, merely remarking as it went, One side will make you grow taller, and the other side will make you grow shorter. One side of what? The other side of what? Thought Alice to herself. Of the mushroom, said the caterpillar, just as if she had asked it aloud, and in another moment it was out of sight. Alice remained looking thoughtfully at the mushroom for a minute, trying to make out which were the 2 sides of it, and, as it was perfectly round, she found this a very difficult question. However, at last she stretched her arms around it as far as they would go, and broke off a bit of the edge with each hand. And now which is which, she said to herself, and nibbled a little off the right-hand bit to try the effect. The next moment she felt a violent blow underneath her chin. It had struck her foot. She was a good deal frightened by this very sudden change, but she felt that there was no time to be lost, as she was shrinking rapidly, so she set to work at once to eat some of the other bit. Her chin was pressed so closely against her foot that there was hardly room to open her mouth, but she did it at last, and managed to swallow most of the left-hand bit. Come, my head's free at last, said Alice in a tone of delight, which changed to alarm in another moment when she found that her shoulders were nowhere to be found. All she could see when she looked down was an immense length of neck, which seemed to rise like a stalk out of a sea of green leaves that lay far below her. What can all that green stuff be? Said Alice, and where have my shoulders gone to, and oh, my poor hands! How is it I can't see you? She was moving them about as she spoke, but no result seemed to follow, except a little shaking among the distant green leaves. As there seemed to be no chance of getting her hands up to her head, she tried to get her head down to them, and was delighted to find that her neck could bend around easily in any direction, like a serpent. She had just succeeded in curving it down into a graceful zigzag, and was going to dive in among the leaves when she found to be nothing but the tops of the trees under which she had been wandering, when a sharp hiss made her draw back in a hurry. A large pigeon had flown into her face, and was beating her violently with its wings, "Serpent!" screamed the pigeon. "I'm not a serpent," said Alice indignantly. "Let me alone." "Serpent, I say again," repeated the pigeon, but in a more subdued tone, and added with a kind of sob, "I've tried every way, but nothing seems to suit them." "I haven't the least idea what you're talking about," said Alice. "I've tried the roots of trees, and I've tried banks, and I've tried hedges," the pigeon went on, without attending to her. "But these serpents, there's no pleasing them." Alice was more and more puzzled, but she thought there was no use in saying anything more till the pigeon had finished. "As if it wasn't trouble enough hatching the egg," said the pigeon, "but I must be on the lookout for serpents night and day. Why, I haven't had a wink of sleep these 3 weeks." "I'm very sorry you've been annoyed," said Alice, who was beginning to see its meaning. "And just as I'd taken the highest tree in the wood," continued the pigeon, raising its voice to a shriek, "and just as I was thinking I should be free of them at last, they must needs come rolling down from the sky. Ugh! Serpents! But I'm not a serpent, I tell you," said Alice. I'm a, well, what are you?" said the pigeon. "I can see you're trying to invent something." I'm a little girl," said Alice, rather doubtfully, as she remembered the number of changes she had gone through that day. "A likely story, indeed," said the pigeon in a tone of the deepest contempt. "I've seen a good many little girls in my time, and never one with such a neck as that. No, you're a serpent. There's no use denying it. I suppose you'll be telling me next that you've never tasted an egg." "I have tasted eggs, certainly," said Alice, who was a very truthful child. "But little girls eat eggs quite as much as serpents do, you know." "I don't believe it," said the pigeon. "But if they do, why, then they're a kind of serpent. That's all I can say." This was such a new idea to Alice that she was quite silent for a minute or two, which gave the pigeon the opportunity of adding, "You're looking for eggs. I know that well enough. And what does it matter to me whether you're a little girl or a serpent?" "It matters a good deal to me," said Alice hastily. "But I'm not looking for eggs, as it happens, and if I was, I shouldn't want yours. I don't like them raw." "Well, be off then," said the pigeon in a sulky tone, as it settled down again into its nest. Alice crouched down among the trees as well as she could, for her neck kept getting entangled among the branches, and every now and then she had to stop to untwist it. After a while she remembered that she still held the pieces of mushroom in her hands, and she set to work very carefully, nibbling first at one and then at the other, and growing sometimes taller and sometimes shorter, until she had succeeded in bringing hers down to her usual height. It was so long since she had been anything near the right size that it felt quite strange at first, but she got used to it in a few minutes and began talking to herself as usual. "Come, there's half my plan done now. How puzzling all these changes are. I'm never sure what I'm going to be from one minute to another. However, I've got back to my right size. The next thing is to get into that beautiful garden. How is that to be done, I wonder?" As she said this, she came suddenly upon an open place, with a little house in it about 4 feet high. "Whoever lives here," thought Alice, "it'll never do to come upon them this size. Why, I should frighten them out of their wits." So she began nibbling at the right-hand bit again, and did not venture to go near the house till she had brought herself down to 9 inches high. And that is Alice this week. I didn't quite have the poor Bill reflection that I had in the first time, but some really cool stuff. Well, anyway, Swati's next. She's got 2 books here. I'm going to let her introduce them both to you and give her the floor for the next little bit. So, without further ado, here's Swati Chavda. And Swati, I hope I said it right. If I didn't, please be gentle with me. Alright, let's get to it, guys, shall we?
Hi, this is an excerpt from my book called Ignite, Beat Burnout and Rekindle Your Inner Fire. Chapter 1. What is the scariest thing you have heard of? No, we are not talking wars and violence and obvious atrocities. We are not talking Halloween either, nor the latest plastic surgery disaster of yet another celebrity. What then is the scariest thing you have heard about? An ordinary situation on an ordinary day, affecting normal, hardworking, brilliant people across different spheres of work, age, race, culture, and gender. This question had never crossed my mind until a strange conversation occurred one day. An acquaintance I met after a gap of several years. He was a successful, fit, well-to-do person who seemingly had it all. He answered my casual, "How are things?" with a single word that sent chills down my spine. Surviving. Surviving? I laughed. Being modest, aren't we? After all, I had seen his Facebook pictures with a huge house, fancy cars, yes, 2 of them, and a picture-perfect family like many of my other friends. "You seem to be doing fantastic," I had added, unable to reconcile what I knew of his life with his current despondent tone. He shrugged and forced a smile. "I guess I'm doing okay. It's just... He paused for a moment and looked into the distance. He seemed to be searching for words to describe a feeling he was confronting for the first time. I said nothing, but I was intrigued. At last, he looked at me sheepishly. "I'm doing great, actually. It's just that getting through each day seems like such a chore." Then he gave an embarrassed laugh and changed the topic. After a short chit-chat, we went our separate ways. But the conversation stayed with me. How could someone who apparently had it all have become so devoid of... I stopped myself because I was finding it difficult to pick the right word to describe what he seemed devoid of. What exactly was my friend devoid of? What had happened to make him incapable of greeting each new day with joy, a song on his lips and a fire in his heart? Fire. Yes, that was the answer. A piece of puzzle fell in place. The spark of life was missing. The fire had gone out of his dreams, and nothing specific had happened to cause this decay. It was a slow burnout. Burnout. Why had it taken me so long to recognize it? After all, some years ago I had been the very same place where my friend was now. I suppose we shut out memories of stressful times once we are out of that phase. But once I noticed this fact, my interest in burnout grew. I looked around and saw it everywhere. In hotshot professionals jet-setting across the globes, in single mothers working 2 jobs, in young workers paying off their student loans, in high school students, in homemakers, in everyone crossing boundaries of age, race, gender, or socio-economic status. Everyone was struggling to keep up with the demands of having to do it all. As a result, fire was going out from dreams all across the world, in all the strata of society. The effects of burnout were plain for all to see, in droopy gaits and ashen hearts greeting mornings with, "Oh no, another day to make it through. Do I have to get out of bed? Really?" But it doesn't have to be that way. It is possible to wake up each morning with joy, eagerly anticipating the opportunities waiting in every moment. It is possible to feel excited about one's work, not as something that one has to do, but something that one gets to do. So, what does it take to rekindle that fire in you? And how do you ensure that it does not go out again? In theory, this is simple. First, you will need to gather fuel. After all, you cannot burn what is already consumed and burned out. You will then need to bring back the spark and keep applying heat, making sure that there is enough air to fan the flames. This is the same principle when you build a campfire. Yet, what is clear in principle often becomes hazy while translating into practice. Therefore, in the following chapters, we will walk together through the exact steps required to get the fire, that is, your inner fire, going. Thank you. Hi, I'm Swati Chavda. I'm going to read you some poems from my book, Love at the Speed of Light. One of the poems from this collection, called At the Edge of Space and Time, won the 2020 Aurora Award. I had written these poems when I was an awkward teenager who was more comfortable with make-believe people in make-believe worlds than living in the real world. All my poems were about the situations the characters from these stories found themselves in. I've been asked why I chose the title Love at the Speed of Light. Here's the answer. By the way, the title and one of the poems in the collection are the only 2 things that were written recently. Everything else is from my teenage days. Now, if you're wondering which of the 13 poems is recent, I'm going to let you take a guess. If you read the book and think you know the answer, write to me. I'll have a special gift for you if you're right. Now back to the title. Why did I call it Love at the Speed of Light? Many poems in this collection have themes of love and space. Not sure how that happened because I hadn't really planned it. It was a subconscious decision which just somehow happened. But looking at it in hindsight, I felt that love needed to move at the speed of light in order to reach far off places, to create connections between star-crossed lovers. Obviously, these are the themes which a teenage me was obsessed with. Maybe some of it is not so important anymore, but I'll just leave it as it is. Also, love at the speed of light is also a limitation. That's the way I look at it. What if love, in fact, can transcend the speed of light? So I had these kind of thoughts running through my mind when I came up with that title. Now, without much ado, I'll get to the poems. The first one I'm going to read today is called The Land of Love. The path of love was strewn with thorns. The world frowned, throwing obstacles endless. I was here, you were there, across the oceans. We faced the torment of separation. The world failed in breaking our love, though it succeeded in making us live at two different ends of this planet. There was a reign of distance and time, as we were too far, far from each other. But always it persisted, this love of ours. It grew and grew, till it reached infinity and broke all the barriers of time and all space. They no more frighten us, the oceans unfathomable, nor do borders stop us from meeting, as we have now reached the land of love, where time is still and distance meaningless. The next one is called The Waiting. This poem is sadder compared to the more optimistic one which I had just read. I think in my story, the character in the poem, The Waiting, that character eventually died and then lingered as a mournful spirit of cold winds and short days. I'm not sure how I knew about such weather because I had written it while living in the tropical heat of India. But well, it is what it is. Now on to the poem. She waited for him in the shadow of an autumn tree. She waited beside a slowly freezing creek. Merciless wind from the cliffs above stripped branches relentlessly. The dry, discarded leaves drifted down the rock, coming to rest in her hair, and she waited. She waited when the birds flew south, their plaintive calls beseeching her to leave before she became one with the winter landscape. But he had not come, and so she waited. Let me end this session with a poem that won the Aurora Award. It is called The Edge of Space and Time. Far on the planet he stands, on a nameless mountain. He gazes upon the solar systems he has left behind. There's a star he sees, a once familiar star, and then he remembers her. Once upon a time, on a planet called Earth. Like the Earth orbits the sun, he had said, I want you with me always. And for a while she stayed. They swept across planets and saw cities filled with lovers like glittering lights, with passions, attractions, and warm interactions. But they swept closer and saw never-ending fights in lonely city deserts, holding everything that hurts. It was good while it lasted. They were sons of their own solar systems, not Earth's orbiting their central star. A star can't become a planet, and if it does, a world or two might end. None should attempt that alchemy. They should have stayed bound together as a binary star. It was good while it lasted, no more. He has come way up from all this. He has dropped the weights to soar high above the sky. When, where, how, and why, all these he knows not. He knew them once, but then forgot. He has forgotten all his lessons, all the classes, all the sessions. He has forgotten all the scars, up above among the stars. Up here, yet he is so near, the world that he left behind. It is still so real in his mind. She may think he has forgotten her, but here, beyond the edge of space and time, it is his impertinence and his crime to excavate buried memories, the lips that smile, the arms that hold, their words so kind, but eyes so cold. Without passion or activity, the key word was captivity. Here, traveling beyond the speed of light, he has to be precisely right in whatever he undertakes, with no room for a mistake. Mistakes such as they had made, everything that they had said. Could she not too break chains and conventions and spread her wings to reach here and now, millions of light years away, and learn to be free in this world which teaches taking and giving, loving and living? He will be waiting beyond the edge of space and time, millions of light years away. Go, be together, a binary star. That's all for today, friends. Hope you're enjoying the weather. I am. Goodbye. This excerpt is from a sequel to Ignite that I am currently working on. It is called Refuel, and it deals exclusively with the element of fuel from the fire triad that Ignite describes. This book will hit the stores early in 2021. Chapter 1, Two Faces of Fire. Midnight, December 2008, New Delhi, India. I am a champion, I said to myself over and over again as my feet pounded the treadmill. I was coaxing out yet another mile from my tired legs. Keep moving, one more step, one more mile, one more day. As a staff neurosurgeon in a major hospital in one of the most populated cities in the world, life was not busy, for that would be an understatement. Non-stop action was more like it, like Mission Impossible on steroids, minus the fun. I had come home after yet another hectic day. Early morning rounds, long hours in the operating room, more rounds, ER visits, some more rounds, referrals from other specialties, holding up hope here, conveying bad news there, lather, rinse, repeat, and so on until long after sundown. Somewhere in the city, shoppers were out in glitzy malls, getting ready to usher in the new year. Families were getting together to celebrate. Parties were in full swing. Everywhere in the thick of this crisp Delhi December night, windows glowed bright with warmth from within, and trees were aglitter with strings of lights. Everywhere except at my place. Keep moving, I told myself. Winners waste no time on frivolous things. So I did my 10K despite the late hour and the long day. Everything was fine as long as I kept moving. But reality has a tendency to creep upon you when you're not watching. It stalks you with silent stealth, watching, always waiting for the right time. It pounces upon you when you're least expecting it, and it pounced on me later that night. As I stood under the shower and washed away the tiredness of the day, the part of my mind that had been goading me to keep moving finally shut up, or shut down. I let the hot water of the shower drench my resistance that night. I cried. Keep moving? To what end? 2 months earlier, my father had died. He always used to say that someday he'd stop running after things involving the daily grind, to find time for the things he truly wanted. He never got around to that point. Would I? Midnight, December 2009, Calgary, Canada. Streams of aurora borealis swayed over the city. The dancing lights had blinked in suddenly. I had spotted them from the car, and we stopped at a safe place to watch. Now the lights arced in graceful sweeps from the north, and I huddled in the cold and watched, mesmerized. I had moved halfway across the world to gain new skills in my career. a fellowship to subspecialize in my already super specialized profession. To be an elite among the elites was how I might have looked at it at another time. But not anymore. I had moved halfway across the world to gain new skills. Instead, I ended up gaining something entirely unexpected: clarity. A fresh perspective on life. A change of scene can do that sometimes. In that moment of lucid realization, I knew that keep moving was not always a wise advice. Higher, faster, and farther are not always the best goals. I needed to learn to be in the here and now. In that moment of clarity, I knew what I wanted. I wanted to follow the lights to the northern horizon, to find my North Star, so to speak. I wanted to follow in the footsteps of the Arctic explorers or set sail with Magellan across the sea. I wanted to clamber behind Mallory and Irwin and learn what happened to them after they disappeared in the mist. In spirit, of course. What I did not want was this: to be jerked awake by the shrill ring of the alarm clock, to rush to work another day, to stay confined, body and soul, between sterile walls and a roof that spoke no language that humans could ever understand. I could barely take another moment of that clawing landscape. Yet leaving would make me a quitter, right? Right? So I hung on. After all, years ago it was the spirit of exploration that had led me to choose neurosurgery, the most cutting edge of medical sciences. So, in a way, wasn't I already following in the footsteps of the explorer I had admired from afar? Was I now simply being fickle by wanting out? Yet, a part of me knew I was not entirely wrong. Over years, I saw what working as a neurosurgeon was really like. Practical knowledge? Yes, but no deep insights about how the human brain functions in its myriad dazzling ways. It was all and only about mastering skills and implementing them robotically over and over again. Hardly any time even to explain to patients about what was happening to them. It was all and mostly about dealing with administrators and bureaucrats, walking around the minefields of other people's egos, watching death wrestle its victims away one by one by one. Missing meals, missing sleep, missing most forms of human interactions except those that involve getting things done. And worst of all, missing connection with my own authentic self while the clock ticked away relentlessly. Enough. Do I dare? Soon maybe, not yet. After all, I was not a quitter, was I? October 2010, Calgary. The first week after my fellowship ended, I did not know what to do with my time. I had a spreadsheet open in front of me with a list of hospitals where I could now apply for a staff position. I had already updated my CV. Everything was ready, yet I could not bring myself to hit send. I wanted one more day of not returning to the grind. Yet I was not accustomed to leisure. Everything felt strange, not having anywhere to rush to in the morning, not getting to demonstrate how important my work, and by extension I, was. Not having constant activity to shield me from questions such as, who are you? What do you really want from life? The questions were scary, for they required me to think. People say that thoughtless actions can be destructive. Just imagine what actionless thoughts can be like. So yes, the questions were scary, for they required me to think while not continuing to act. At first I ran from these questions. Running is easy. I was already good at that. I was already addicted to that process, and now that I had nowhere to run to, reality hit me full in the face. I had become a workaholic, and now I was in the clutch of withdrawal symptoms. Of course, the easy way to deal with withdrawal is to jump on the cycle of addiction again. More work, more lucrative work, more important kind of work. Work that would keep me fully occupied. But the question that had pounced upon me that night in New Delhi returned again. To what end? The way I had been working so far was toxic. I had given more than I had paused to take, and that could not go on forever. It was physiologically impossible to sustain. In that moment, I knew that if I stepped inside a hospital again, I'd scream. How disgusting would that be? A part of me still nagged, but you've got to get back into the race. This is what you're trained to do. This time, the rest of me rebelled. I will not. You cannot make me. Not this time. And in that moment, I knew what I should have realized long ago. I was burnt out. I'd been so burnt out that the only way I was surviving was by numbing myself through running, marking milestone after milestone, following the toxic mantra of higher, faster, farther, that I had somehow imbibed somewhere. Because that's what champions do, it seems. Ha, ha, ha. Enough, I said out loud, and this time I meant it.
Let me help you tell your story the way you want it told. If you're in the genres of science fiction, fantasy, thriller, historical, or young adult, I have services that can definitely help you. I can produce, narrate, and master said audiobook so it's ready for Amazon and any other software you need. For more information, see my website at jpenteloresco.wordpress.com/audiobook services. You worked hard to create that story, and I'll work just as hard to make sure it's told in the right way. And that was Swati Chavda, ladies and gentlemen. Check out her books, check out her works. She's an amazing creative person. And Swati, I'm really hoping to have you on my show early next year. I really want you. We have had some great chats online over the years, and although we can't really do it in person right this strange minute, in this strange moment in history, I'm looking forward to the day we actually do meet face to face in person. But also, I'm looking forward to having you on chat anytime you'd like. So you are invited, and consider yourself invited. So I'm very excited. I got 2 more interviews left. Episode 450 is going to be my 101 Tales presentation. 101 Tales happens November 17th to 21st, so it starts literally in that evening. There's some great acts. I am on the 18th, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm wrong and it's tomorrow night, I will definitely correct this right before this airs. But I believe it's November 18th I'm going to be on. I'm excited. There's some great people doing the show. I am flattered to be among this amazing guest list. JD Estrada, myself, Mark Park, Elsa Garza is an incredible talent, Anis Eskander, Chuck Pinot. There's so many great people that I've just had the chance even to talk to. I got one more live stream this week with Go Turner. That's going to be this Thursday as well. That's going to be a little bit more of a 101 Tales promotion. I hope you guys listened to my chat with Michael Oden. He was so cool. But yeah, now the Wonderland continues with episode 455, and it'll be every 5 episodes. So here's 5 or 60. Obviously, the weekend episodes, maybe when I get to the milestones, I might decide to do something a little different, like I'm doing with this episode. But yeah, that's basically the plan going forward. I'll be reading episodes every weekend, and I got some cool guests coming up too for readers as well. Christine Aziz coming back. Devin Caton is coming on to the show. I'm hoping to get a few more before the year's out. But yeah, this is really cool. Finally, I'm just going down memory lane. I've just posted some of my favorite interviews throughout the years from every era. Brendan Nagatal, Robert J. Sawyer being an important thing. Adam Dries from the early years. I got into Vanessa Cardue. I got John Maven right now I'm talking about. I got the episode where my sister makes me sound like a goldfish. I mean, really, really think about what I'm saying there. What does a goldfish actually sound like? All in all, though, I'm excited. I'm nervous as hell, in a good way, though. And I got more things coming and announcing, too. For 101 Tales, I'm reading 4 stories. I'm reading from Alice Zero. I'm reading from Corey, which is my latest work in progress. You see an eyeball scene you've never seen before. I have my comic script. I'm reading the first 10 pages to the audience, the dialogue toward anyway. Beyond that, I'm also got my 2 works, Cloud Diver and Alice Zero. So without further ado, thank you guys for listening to this episode. Just Joshing. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so a number of different ways. Subscribe to the podcast. I'm on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, Deezer, Audible, as well as my YouTube channel, Joshua Panteloresco. Subscribe there. If you want to support the podcast in a financial way, there I have my Patreon, which you can click on the link. And yeah, if you want to join the crew, join the crew. More Patreon-only content is going to be coming up on a much more regular basis starting Wednesday. The internet's finally coming to my house on a regular basis, so I can just do more stuff, which is exciting me on all kinds of levels. Beyond that, yeah, stay inspired. Get my books. See you guys at 101 Tales. I'll be talking more about that throughout the rest of the week. 2 more interviews to go, and the end of an era. So, guys, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.
Josh.